I did my project on the Alexander sarcophagus. My name is Anna Garibaldi. The discovery of the sarcophagus. The sarcophagus was originally discovered in Lebanon, its an ancient city of Sidon. It was originally believed to hold the body of Alexander the Great, but has since been identified as a final resting place for King Abdelaziz. It was discovered in 1877 along with several other sarcophagi, and it now resides in the Istanbul Archaeology Museum. Alexander and Abdelaziz. Alexander the Great was the king of Macedon in 336 BC to 323 BC. He spent most of his life ruling and expanding his power and authority throughout the Western Asia and northeastern Africa. King Abdelaziz is best known as the man who commissioned the Alexander sarcophagus, discovered in 1887 in the royal necropolis of Sidon. It shows Alexander during a fight against the Persians and the king of Sidon during a hunt. Alexander the Great. The Alexander the Great argument. Centuries after his death, the conqueror's image helped to tie together the diverse kingdoms that emerged in his wake. His immediate successors did all they could to associate themselves with his glory. His image on art was widely portrayed in the Hellenistic period. The images shown on the sarcophagi prove it was intended for him because of the attire and the equestrian stance that he is normally depicted as in other artworks. He is shown wearing a lion's head that portrays his genealogy connecting him to Heracles. Alexander the Great continued. Alexander picked a horseman to be a symbol of coinage and art in the two cases. The horseman might be viewed as a kind of perspective to the ruler himself. In E.D. Clare's treatise entitled The Tomb of Alexander, he published in the early 19th century after he had brought the sarcophagus back to England. He also discusses a large variety of ancient modern accounts regarding Alexander's tomb in Alexandria. In 1948, J.B. Wace published an intriguing argument that the sarcophagus might have come from Alexander's tomb after all. For one, Nectanebo II was the last pharaoh of the 13th dynasty and the final native pharaoh of Egypt. He was defeated by a Persian invasion in 343 BC, and according to Diodorus, he eventually fled south to Ethiopia in about 341 BC. He probably died in exile, so it was unlikely for him to ever occupy the sarcophagus. Apart from a native uprising in 338 BC, the Persian rule continued for the next decade until Alexander's arrival in 332 BC. It is likely that the sarcophagus still lay unused when Ptolemy brought Alexander's corpse back to Egypt in 321 BC. It is also said that at the time of his death, his wishes were not granted, meaning he wasn't given a godly burial as he wanted, and he wasn't buried where he asked to be. Here are some pictures of the coinage that depicts Alexander the Great throughout other artwork. The first coin here, he's seen with the lion's helmet or headpiece, and the third coinage too. And here's Alexander the Great zoomed in and colored in from the sarcophagus. Again, he's wearing the lion headpiece and he is on his usual equestrian stance. The Abdelaziz argument. This picture here I had just found and added it into the PowerPoint. Is of King Abdelaziz and Alexander the Great. You can tell from his clothes that represent Sidon. Okay, so the argument starts that King Abdelaziz is portrayed fighting the Persians with Alexander the Great on the battle side of the sarcophagus. The scenes depicted on the sarcophagus relate to events in real life of Abdelaziz. It represents 4 battles and two hunting scenes. In the lion hunting, Alexander comes to aid of Abdelaziz, who takes center. And although there's hardly information to give about Abdulinimus, it is a strong argument that the sarcophagus was intended for him. His background genealogy makes sense into why he was given an important role by Alexander and why he would want Alexander depicted on the sarcophagus. Abdulinimus was appointed king by Alexander in 333 BC, though the tradition claims that the honor of selecting the king was given to Hephaestus after Straton II surrendered to Alexander because of his involvement and support for the Persians. And since then, there's also been confusion to where Alexander was actually buried. Conclusion. In conclusion, Alexander was a great influence in the Hellenistic period, and his victories and greatness has been portrayed in the art and coinage such as in the Alexander sarcophagus. Like what we see in modern times, those who associate themselves with someone of high importance or someone who influences them a lot like to depict themselves with that person, either a picture or a sarcophagus, because that was what their life revolved around. As for King Abdulinimus, he went from a gardener to a king. Why wouldn't he see Alexander as a big influence on his life? Of course, he would want him on a sarcophagus because he wouldn't have been successful without Alexander. So it makes sense that he wanted to capture a significant time of his life on the sarcophagus. Thank you.